Sometimes letting people yap is the best course of action, and it especially is sometimes the best course of action when there's someone you don't agree with and they're arguing for a point you don't agree with. Because half the time they're just going to end up yapping themselves into a corner and making them look like a fool. And this is the case for people who defend AI art or generative AI. I guess I don't even want to call it art, but people who defend generative AI like it is the most important thing of their life and it is simply the next big thing and the greatest thing that technology could ever provide to human beings. And a lot of the time, I just once again let these people who defend generative AI speak because it's just kind of entertaining to see them like post the biggest piece of slop of all time on the timeline and say, "This is it, the pinnacle of art. This is the future." And then you just kind of look at it, and it's like this is probably the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life. But another type of people who defend generative AI are people who post on Reddit, and there is once again subreddits where people defend generative AI, and I did find one of them and I have known about one of them, and it is a really funny Reddit to talk about. And I kind of just wanted to go down the line of this Reddit just to kind of have a good time. And the Reddit that I'm talking about is defending AI art. I wonder what this Reddit's going to be about. I wonder what they're going to try and argue here. But I just kind of wanted to go through the post of this just because I had a good time looking at it and laughing at it. And it was a really fun time for me to see people try and defend using generative AI and kind of saying it's equal. So let's just kind of go down the line. I've got some recent posts. I also look at some of the highest upvoted posts of all time just to get a full perspective on what's going on. Because once again, this is what I do. I just like seeing people speak and seeing what they're talking about, especially if they're people who I don't agree with, because it is kind of just fun to watch. So let's just do everyone's favorite thing, which is a Reddit review, everybody. All right. Reddit review episode 1725. Let's get going. So the first one we have right here is basically just hating on artists who get mad at people for using generative AI rather than commissioning an artist. And you can see this entire thing is AI generated. It says, don't use AI, just commission me instead. Why? AI trains on other people's work without permission, and you make money drawing other people's IP? That's different. How? Because if you use AI, I don't get paid. Oh, so that was the point. Basically saying that the only reason why people are against generative AI is because they don't get paid, and it's a way for them to make money. And that's kind of a big thing. It's kind of trying to co-inflate fan art and generative AI with them equally stealing other people's work. Which, a lot of the time, and I would assume the vast majority, if not every single person who's made sort of something like a game or a show, really likes fan art. It's very rare, if not, you think you see it all, where you have a creator say, yes, don't make fan art on my show. I will hate you if I do it. And so one big thing is that consent is a big thing here, where people who actually draw and make these content, like a lot of times say like, yes, you can draw. Wow. Actual artists who made, their own art didn't consent to their art being used for generative AI. And so that's a big thing too. And it also is just kind of weirdly hating on people who are trying to make a living and weirdly hating on people who are artists for a career. So like, this is kind of what we're going to see here. A lot of what we're going to see here is this type of stuff. Another thing is just like them kind of freaking out and being befuddled at the fact that people are against AI art. Like, yikes. I was on a meme subreddit and I saw this, and then it's just someone making a drawing saying human made art and then AI art. It's kind of a funny picture if you do think about it, and if you do actually have a brain. But it is just like another factor of these posts is saying like, actually, I saw this and I don't agree with it, and I think you're bullying me. Because a big thing about people who post on the subreddit are also saying like, these guys are massive bullies, and I think that's not okay. If they make fun of me for using generative AI, that's not nice. Basically, just kind of thinking that it's absolutely wild for people to conceivably not like generative AI in any capacity. Another genre of these stuff are like very just unself-aware questions that people ask. Like this one saying, game jams that aren't anti-AI. Think of being a hobbyist game dev, and I found tools for generating sprites and music. I was also thinking of joining a game jam to get into it and see how it goes. On itch.io, I've been searching for game jams that allow for AI content within the game, but it looks like the ones I've been seeing so far say no to generative AI. Are there any game jams that allow the usage of Gen AI? Like, do you not have the self-awareness to think, I wonder why so many of these say no generative AI? Maybe it's because the entire purpose of game jams and making games in general is celebrating the humanity behind art, and also celebrating the process and the fact that, even if you don't have a lot of time to make a game, you can still make something good. And like a lot of the time, games also that are game jams in the first place eventually go up and be massive things. Things that are short projects can be massive things overall. And it's kind of like a proof of concept to kind of show that you can make a good game. Why would they not want AI art? what possibly could be there mentally to make it seem like they don't want generative AI? Maybe it's because it kind of shits on the entire process of making a game. Have you ever thought about that? Did you ever consider that when asking this question? Have you ever considered that if you are simply banking on generative AI to make games, to make content in general, maybe it's not the idea for you, and maybe one of the fundamental ideas behind gaming itself has been a human making something that's good to share to other human beings, and not just a machine spitting out a coagulated, just a glob of whatever the fuck it is learned from. Have you ever thought about that? This is another type of content that we see a lot, which is just really unaware posts. And then these are like some of the highest upvoted posts of all time on this subreddit. This one I think is the most upvoted one of all time. Where like a lot of these posts, one of them is just people who are mistakenly thinking stuff is AI, and then them saying, oopsies, you just got tricked, and that means generative AI is equally as good. When it is kind of just the fact of the matter now is that there are so many people who are now paranoid about generative AI that they think that anything that actually even has a semblance of generative AI, which is once again like this is Studio Ghibli, which it was a massive trend with AI or with generative AI, where they would like make stuff look like Studio Ghibli, and so that made a lot of people paranoid because it is very hard. It's getting increasingly hard to like tell what's real and what's not, and they're just saying, "Aha, idiot!" right here. This guy couldn't tell, and that means generative AI is the next big thing. That's kind of another thing as well that you see is just them shitting on people who can't tell and thinking that that means it justifies generative AI. This is another high voted one. There's going to be a lot of mental gymnastics here in their defense of generative AI, where it basically tries to compare people who got inspired from these artists like Van Gogh, Monet, Picasso, which this is also generative AI content, to AIs that learn from the pictures. Holy shit, the pictures that are fed into their code and stuff like that, and then it tries to paint the poor AI as a victim of circumstance and a victim of evil protesters against the shit that is generative AI. And there's obviously a vast difference here. This takes like time and effort, and also just scale. This just takes ripping a bunch of content that is not yours and putting it into a machine and then having it spit out. And also another fundamental difference here is that the difference here is plagiarism, because this is just simply reusing the people's art and spitting it out. This is using inspiration and not copying the exact art exactly. Like if this guy came out and said, I just drew the exact same thing, like I drew the Mona Lisa again, people are going to say, hey, you're plagiarizing. But if you drew something that it was inspired by the style of the Mona Lisa, people would say, hey, that's pretty cool. Well, this just kind of plagiarizes and then spits it back out. And obviously you can see there's a fundamental difference here if you think about it for 2 seconds. Another one you also see here is like, this is a classic thing that people see, a lot of anti-art people see, which is like they're shitting on these types of like really single color paintings while then saying that, AI art is the greatest thing ever of all time. Generative AI is the greatest thing ever. When I'm someone who's actually looked into this, and like usually when you see these types of paintings right here, it's not just like, oh, it's a giant wall of painting. There's usually 2 things here that you can kind of think about, why this is in a museum. It's either A, this is the first time a color of this sort has kind of been painted in such a way. It's kind of like discovering a new color. It's like Vanta Black, where it's a really cool thing. You have not seen this type of color really represented in the real world and like actual paint. And you really only see it in like computer generations or simulations. Or this is like painted in such a way that it's so flat and like well done technically that you can't even see the brush strokes. Sometimes on painting you can see brush strokes. You can see like the way the artist kind of drove the paintbrush across the canvas. And sometimes when you see this, it's actually like so unbelievably flat you can't even tell that this was like actual paint, and it looks like it was just printed on. So that's kind of what you see here. And this actually takes skill rather than having a computer regurgitate whatever the fuck we're looking at here and saying that it looks like the greatest thing of all time. So just a fun little art class for you, I guess, from someone who just kind of looked this up and had a brain to think about why these kind of go in art museums. And in case you were wondering, this is what those usually are. And another big thing too, and we're kind of back to like the not the most popular things, but this is something I saw, and actually I saw this posted on Twitter at first and kind of prompted me to like make this video. And another thing too is like a lot of the subreddits about like, oh, anti-AI people are bullies. And then you have posts like this, which is just bullying people on Twitter and bullying people online, which they actually block, which is kind of a funny thing to notice here, where it's basically saying how to properly use AI. My content without AI, my content with AI, it doesn't fucking exist. And then they just say like, this is a view botted post, and people are just kind of engaging in farming for being against AI, even though this is like a VTuber, a content creator, and it actually takes like a human being behind it to make the type of content. And then they just kind of go on and like bully them and say that they're broke and are view botting, and which is something that they claim a lot of anti-AI people are doing on this subreddit. And then they go out and then bully people. It's kind of hypocritical and it's kind of funny. And this is kind of just like the final thing I wanted to post here. This is really funny. I don't know why I thought this was so funny. I think it was just the comment under it, but it's basically someone just saying me after 2 minutes of browsing r/defending AI art, and a guy considering suicide. And then the caption under it is the funniest thing. Like, seriously, I saw this and legit rubbed my eyes and blinked like a cartoon character. What do posts like these even achieve? It achieves you getting mad at it. That's what it does. It achieves you making a simple sort of self-reflection and thinking, why does generative AI make people feel this way? What have I done to do this? What have I done to cause this? And why do people hate generative AI so much? What have we learned? What have we learned from looking at the enemy, looking at people who love generative AI? Is that they don't know how to think through why people are mad at generative AI in any capacity. They don't have the mental capacity to think through why people might be mad about this. They kind of have this spite fetish for actual artists who get mad at generative AI, and then kind of just like sort of celebrate the idea of making them go broke. And they also say that they don't like bullying, but then they go out and bully people themselves, and it is kind of just a massive hypocritical thing. And so it is just a fun thing to see in how they try to justify their actions and try to like say that this generative AI is the coolest thing ever, when it is just kind of misery incarnate on the planet. It is manifestation of misery, and that's the only thing that it ever can actually properly represent, no matter what it even looks like in any capacity. All it is sadness and despair, and just a dismal outlook on the future if this shit keeps on going. But that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Hope it was a miserable experience for you as well, because it was for me. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.